Hi, it's What If Wednesday time with Susan Bennett Fisher and Martin Fisher, the co-founders of Body of Nine. What if you knew what your children's bodies were saying to you?
How could you actually help them grow up? How could you understand them better? How could you help them? How could they help you? And what we're going to be talking about today in our What If Wednesday. How does your children's bodies inform you?
About how to be a better mom or dad, parent.
And how to help them grow up to be honoured for who they are. But first, what is Body of Nine?
So in our bodies, we're born with 9 centers, obviously. 3 of them are head, three are in the chest, and 3 of them are in the torso. And when your kid is born, they come out with one of those 9 parts of the body more active than the others. So they're using a specific set of muscles, bones, and fascia in a different way than you do. So of the 9, 1 is active. So for example, in me, when I was born, my chest, the center of my sternum, and the muscles of my intercostal muscles and my rib cage were born to help me feel the world. And that was true from the day I was born until this day now.
And you've got a bigger chest to prove it, yes.
Yes, a larger rib cage on average.
And when I was born, my head was big, as it is now, and it's always been bigger, and I wear big hats.
And you lead your movement from your head.
Yes, I'm very, very floppy, and I suspect that inside my mother's body, in utero, I was actually kind of floppy because, as Susan has often said, and I have absolutely no idea, but apparently when you have a child, you can feel it inside you, and each of the natural numbers appears to have different impact internally.
So when I was pregnant with my children, each child moved differently, put pressure differently, moved at different timings, and was quite unique. But now, in looking back on that experience, they were already declaring their natural numbers. My natural number 8 daughter, where the sacrum is the active part, she used to dig her sacrum into the side of the wall of my uterus and push with her feet as hard as she could. And that is a movement that actually super supports the bodies of natural number 8s. My 2 was just moving around all the time, and she still is moving around all the time. And then my 7 would drop into stillness for long periods. And then she would often use her elbows and her arms. So each one of them was, uniquely different.
And as soon as they came out, some children use their eyes, open their eyes initially, and some don't. But that's another thing to be aware of, is that some children are going to need eye contact. The second they turn up, come up and look at you and say, "Hi, I'm here."
Yeah, that was another wild thing for me. My older 2 were 8 and 7, and they came out eyes closed. Not much interest in talking to people, not super interactive. And then my 3rd child was born with her eyes open, these beautiful blue eyes saying, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And they have never stopped saying, "Look at me, look at me, look at me," and be with me and engage with me. So your children's bodies begin from the very beginning to start to tell you about what they need and what they want from you in terms of support, both physical and emotional and developmental and spiritual, actually. So finding out the natural number of your child helps you be a much better parent.
And there's everything about that. Your child is going to give you pointers. How they move on your lap. Are they floppy? When they were very, very small, did their heads automatically come up sooner? Did they move around with the head when they were leaning into you? Did they lean into you in a certain way? Everything about your child is talking to you
about what they need.
About what they need.
And what they want.
But they're not verbally speaking, but they are talking.
Through their body. I was taking care of my neighbor's baby when he was just a little tiny thing. Maybe just couldn't even sit up yet. So probably 2 months old. And I was holding him on my lap. And he just kept diving around with his head. I'm like, "Oh my God." I said, "This child is a 5 because he's diving around with his head." And over time, we've kept our eye on him. Obviously, we know him quite well. And everything about his physiology supports the fact that he is natural number 5.
And as do I. But, middle child would be going around connecting with the forehead.
Yeah, she would dig her forehead into my throat. So 7 is activated in the forehead. And she would literally, to learn to walk, what she did was she laid on the ground, she put her forehead on the ground, she scooched her little bottom up, and then lifted up her head. And I have a friend who's got a 7 baby, and her baby does exactly the same thing. So they're telling you from the moment they're born, they're learning to use their bodies where they're active and how they're active.
And one of the things to remind yourself is that they're not like you.
Right.
We know that the children that you have are not going to be like you. They don't share the same natural number, which means the way they move is going to be different than the way you do. So when they're learning to walk, help them be them.
Well,
Don't teach them to walk the way that you were taught to walk, because they're going to do each of the 9 different natural numbers actually moves differently and starts their movement and learns to walk very, very differently.
Very differently. And it's really important to allow them to explore their movement in ways that may seem really super strange. You know, like my 8 daughter, she's moving with her low back, and what she would do is scooch across the floor. She would scooch on her butt, and then she'd reach over to a couch and then lift herself up, and then she would swing her bottom back and forth, and it was all about exploring the movement that felt good in her body and worked for her. So movement is the first place that you start to see the natural number of your child, and you'll notice one to the next that they're completely different.
And so supporting your child in the way that they want to move and the way that they support themselves is a really important part of parenting 2.0, if you will. We are giving you ideas and hints that clearly your child is not like you, and clearly if you have more than one, they're not like each other. So learning to listen with your body to what their body is saying can help you not just in how they move, but also how they soothe themselves. Each of the natural numbers, the children are going to be doing something different to amuse themselves. Some are going to need very much your attention. Others aren't going to need much of your attention at all. They're going to do their own thing at various stages throughout their growth and development.
That's right. Each child needs a different way of being held, supported, disciplined, soothed, connected with. So 1, 2, 3s, and 4s, they're going to come out and they're going to want you to look them directly in the eye and hold that eye connection. Whereas 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are not going to want to hold that eye connection with you or even really be very interested in looking you in the eye unless they're just trying to figure out what you're doing.
And it may confuse you because you may have natural number 1, 2, 3, and 4 and wonder, why aren't my children looking at me? Or why doesn't this particular child? Or even my partner, why don't they look at me?
Or if you're a 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 and your children's 1, 2, 3, 4, why are they not hearing you when you're talking to them? Because you're not looking at them. So it makes a huge difference to understand how your child uses their eyes. Also to learn to read the facial expression. Their 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 don't necessarily connect with you. So we jokingly have heard the facial expression particularly for 6s and 8s is RBF, resting B face. And so your child may look grouchy or sad or other things to you when they don't actually feel that way. Intuitively you learn that stuff as a parent. You spend so much time with your children that you intuitively learn to read them. But if you know ahead of time that your child is an 8, for example, my oldest, she didn't want to go to strangers. And every time I would try to hand her off to a stranger, that was a violation of her boundaries, her sense of boundaries and safety. And it made her very, very uncomfortable.
So the lesson there is don't force your children to do things because it's how you would be.
Right.
And natural number 8s, they build their world on trust and being able to be in a place where they feel trust and
they feel safe.
They feel safe. It's really, really important. And one of the unfortunate things about not understanding your child is that there are trauma that you unintentionally could inflict because, as Susan said, if you have a natural number 8 child and you're giving them to people, she is going to be really, really upset because there's boundaries that they're not happy with.
You're not respecting this and creating that sense of safety for them.
But if they get to know that person, they'll be really, really happy and be very, very physical and very, very affectionate, but they take their time, and that time may not be the same kind of time that you use.
Whereas my 2, She just wanted to be in connection with, and she loved people. She was easy to give from one person to another. She enjoyed the interaction with each person. She was as close to her babysitter as she was to me. She really formed these really engaged connections.
And growing up, she needed to be right here so that we could talk to her, we could connect to her, while the other two would be quite happy bouncing around.
And they'd rather, and as they got to be school age, their needs varied quite significantly.
And this is a big deal because, as Susan said, you've learned how to communicate with your child. When they go to school, their teacher probably doesn't understand their differences because not many teachers yet are familiar with this concept of body of 9. So one of the first things that comes to mind as Susan was talking about RBF, natural number 9, for example, those children, those adults, they look like they're not paying attention when they're paying the most attention. Each of the natural numbers has things that the teachers are going to have misunderstandings. Now, most teachers that have been around a while, they learn how to deal with all these different kinds of children. And
right. They know they're different. But this is such a great formula to help them. So if you actually understand your child's natural number, you can go to your teacher and say, well, my daughter is natural number 2, which means she is going to be moving around a lot. So set her up in a way that it's okay for her to move around a lot. Also, she's going to want to engage with all of the kids in the class. Another thing that happened to my daughter was the teacher kept putting her with the kids that had more developmental or engagement issues because she could handle and build the relationships and made everyone feel comfortable. But she thought she was a bad kid because she kept getting put at the table with the bad kids.
Yeah.
And so, explaining to the teacher those kinds of dynamics, recognizing that they're there. My 7, she needed to make her classes all more interesting. She got bored really easily, and she learned early on to get to work with her teachers to make her assignments more interesting.
So each of the natural numbers has a particular way of being, have a way of being at school. Some parts of school are more successful than others with different natural numbers. The fun thing about each of the natural numbers is that children with even natural numbers are very much more physically focused. Children with odd natural numbers, maybe not so much, but they will still be able to use their body as a tool. And teaching them, everybody, all your children and adults, to do and be comfortable with their bodies, because our bodies are our source of information. Now, whether you live in a world of natural number 5 that a lot of the processing happens outside the body, this is still a really important source of information for me. But it's not my decision-making process where, unlike Susan, natural number 6, her decision-making is very much built on what's her body saying rather than how I do it. So everybody learns differently, everyone processes differently, and everyone has different relationships. And at school, it's an interesting crucible for people getting together, certainly people that do and don't know their natural numbers. And one of the things we've learned is that parents working with parents can help their children have relationships with each other. So if you have a child that has made friends, really make the effort to make friends with that child's parents, because that's going to help the flow, no matter what the natural numbers is, whether it's natural numbers
although that's much more important, for example, to kids who are about engagement and connection. They understand, the 1, 2, 3s, and 4s understand that, if you're going to have friends, your parents have to be friends when they're young, because you're not going to be included and invited as easily and as regularly as if you are. So they understand the rules of engagement, and 5s might also. It's a feature of 5. But the point being, different things are needed for different natural numbers.
Yeah. Certainly, if you're children at school, they're doing games, they're doing gym, whatever it is that the child is doing, they're going to move and balance very differently. And one of the things that can happen is that a coach that has a particular natural number, whether they know it or not, is going to try and have their students, the people on the team, do the same kind of moves that they do, which works well for them because they're a natural number 5. But just because they're a natural number 5, their teammates, the people in their team, may not actually benefit from knowing how to move as a natural number 5 because they're probably not natural number 5s.
And this is particularly important as the competitiveness of the level of participation in sports grows, because if you have a coach that just happens to have the same natural number, they're going to work more effectively in supporting you in your movement and your growth on an athletic field. Whereas if they're different, they're not going to understand this component of information yet. So you initiate your movement in the region of your body. I, as a 6, initiate from here. 2s initiate from here. They have this amazing flexibility around that kind of part of the body. So our bodies are better equipped for certain things than other things. And understanding that and understanding how that affects our movement and our performance and our recovery on the field when we're having a hard time. These things are all much better supported when you know their natural number.
So the takeaway here is your children are not like you, but they're talking to you verbally and non-verbally all the time. And learning your natural number and learning that your children have a natural number and how they are wish to be informed and how you can honor them for to be who they are, let them grow their own personal magic, which I will guarantee is going to be different than yours. It's actually okay that they're different.
And it's okay that you treat your children differently one to the next. They are different than each other as well. And one of the myths, I think, of parenting is that children should be treated equally. Really, they should be supported in the way that they want and need to be supported. Because their pace varies, their feelings, their ability to feel their body,
how they make decisions.
All of that stuff is unique to their physiology.
And so this goes back to when you're treating your children differently, having the conversation about how they're different and let them support each other. Let them, because until they get to be old enough to be completely verbal, they're going to communicate even with their other children, with their with their siblings. Then they're going to be able to actually translate on your behalf. When I was growing up, I was translating for my mother for what my sister needed, because I instinctively knew what she needed at a level that my mother couldn't figure out, because she was
different natural number
and many years older. So,
and we have some friends that have a 5 and a 7, and the 5 is the older one, and when she asks for something and they say no, she says okay. Whereas her younger sister, when she asks for something and they say no, she comes up with all the reasons why they should say yes. And the older sister's like, what's going on here? And she doesn't understand, because eventually, the younger sister knows how to badger her parents down until the point where they say yes. And then the 5 is like, what happened here? Where'd the rules go? And so understanding that they're different, they approach life differently, and they need a different kind of response is really important.
And it's okay to explain that to them.
Yes.
And
this is why your brother or sister gets this treatment and you don't.
I grew up in the time where children should be seen and not heard, just on the edge of that. The world is actually way better than that, way smarter than that now. But children also understand much more than you give them credit for. And if you can speak to them the way that their natural number needs that, they will become amazingly, even more amazing.
I know. It's incredible. All 3 of my daughters, they're super strong, and they're super empathetic, and they're super understanding of others because they've known this since they were children.
Yeah.
And it makes for more resilience, happier, stronger children, despite what happens. They've had their fair share of things happen to them,
as do people,
and they've come out okay.
Yeah.
And we really believe that understanding your natural number and your children's natural number and the dynamic that creates in families creates healthier and happier families.
Yes, we've got a fair amount of experience working with families now for the last 9 years. And I think we can honestly say that the families that know this about each other,
they have a whole different dialogue.
Yeah. It's not why did you do this? It's like, well, how did this come about? Everybody does something for a different reason. And your child's going to do something for a reason that wouldn't occur to you, because the reasoning behind how their body works, what they care about, how they move, how they process data, how they make decisions is going to be completely different from the way that you do.
Yes.
And if you say, this is what I would have meant if I meant that, you wouldn't be as accurate.
That's right. Using your lens to interpret the behavior of others will only ever get you in trouble, especially with your kids. So if you want to end up with strong and balanced relationships with your children as they grow, to have supported and balanced children who feel loved and heard, find out their natural number and what to do once you know. It's very powerful.
And you can do that through our website, bodyof9.com, and we look forward to talking to you again next Wednesday.
Yes, bodyof9.com, and you can also watch our other What If Wednesdays. We've done a lot on families and parenting, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Okay.
Thank you.